So he's kind of the inventor of the podcasts, and then Joe Rogan became the king of the podcast.
I'd seen the Elon Musk one where I think he's smoking a joint, right?
But all of the staff just raved about how nice he was, what a really sweet, good guy he was. And
I'm happy for him with his success because you know, he's jumping into the big time now, I guess, right?
Yeah. Everybody's probably heard now that Joe Rogan is moving to Spotify and leaving YouTube. So we're a little sad about it, especially me, because I've been watching his podcasts for years.
Right.
And so we wanted to do a little tribute to Joe Rogan today and say goodbye to him on YouTube. I think he's leaving at the end of October. I could be wrong about that, but he will be going just to Spotify. I'm sure he's going to have just as huge a following. His podcasts are very, there's a wide variety of guests that he has. They're informational. Sometimes they're just entertaining. And he's just a really nice guy. Mm-hmm. Kimbra, haven't you watched some of his podcasts too? Did you?
Yeah, I watched them before you actually turned me on to him, and then I didn't realize that was Joe Rogan because I'd seen the Elon Musk one where I think he's smoking a joint, right? And then you brought him up later, and you were such a big fan, so I said I got to check this guy out. And yes, he does have really interesting guests. I just saw the one with Oliver Stone, which was a really good interview. And they're so long. And it always amazes me that his guests stay with him and everybody keeps watching for like 2 and sometimes 3 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you like our videos, go ahead and click on like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like the time goes by really quickly, and it's something you can play in the background, just like, all the podcasts. You don't have to necessarily sit there and watch people because they're not really doing anything but talking, but you can play them in the background. He just seems like such a nice guy. And when I managed a bar in Hollywood, he used to come there.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. He likes to play pool. We had pool tables. But I never met him, but all of the staff just raved about how nice he was, what a really sweet, good guy he was. And he seems very genuine on the podcast too. He recently had Adam Curry on. Do you remember Adam Curry from MTV? He was the MTV host, or VH1, or one of those shows.
Vaguely. I know the name, but I wasn't into the show, to be honest with you.
He was a host on one of those music video shows back in the 80s, I guess. And he was recently on Joe Rogan's show, and I guess he's the one that came up with the idea to broadcast like as a podcast. So he's kind of the inventor of the podcasts, and then Joe Rogan became the king of the podcast. And so that was a really interesting interview between those two, or conversation, I guess. It's more like a conversation than an interview. So, podcasts have become very popular. Pretty much do whatever you want on your podcast. It's just your voice and your platform. So I think it's really exciting that Joe Rogan has expanded, the idea of the podcast.
That's true, because when I was telling people, friends of mine, that when we were going to do our podcast, a lot of people were like, I don't even really know what a podcast is.
What is that? That's what people always say. They go, yeah, that's great. What's a podcast?
Yeah. So it, like you said, it's all different forms, right? Ours is done. We record it and we release it through YouTube.
Well, we're on. We have Anchor and Spotify and Breaker and. What is the Apple? Aren't we on iTunes or not?
I don't think so. I think we're just Spotify and Anchor right at this
Google
point.
Video or something like that. Something to do with Google.
Right.
But yeah, we're on in Spotify. We're on all the different platforms too, more than we even know.
Yeah.
But some of them are audio, and then YouTube is video. And I like video. So when I watch the podcast, I always go, I look and see the people. So I get their image in my head, and then I go do my other things, whether it's cleaning or whatever else I'm doing, or have it on in the background while I'm on the computer, so I can listen. But I like the visual. I like to be able to see the people and see what they look like too.
Right. That's true. I like that too. I mean, when we first talked about doing this, I was like, oh, let's just do audio because, then we don't have to get all dressed up. But we don't have to get dressed, right? But it is fun to see their faces, and at least for the first little bit. And then, like you said, you can go on and do whatever after, right?
Yeah. I also feel like there's a little more of an emotional attachment when you see the expressions of the people and see that. So,
yeah. And it's interesting, like with Joe Rogan, because like you said, he is a stand-up comedian, or he was a stand-up comedian, right?
he's a comedian. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he considers himself more of a comedian than anything. He has a lot of pride in being a comedian. He's very um, protective and attached to his comedian friends. In the Comedy Store, he always mentions the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, and yeah, and I've seen some of his stand up. You know, he does shows I think for HBO, and he's hysterical. He's a really funny guy, which makes sense to me because we were talking one time about people that think like Joe Rogan is not. He doesn't claim to be this big intellectual. He has intellectuals on his show, but he is a thinker and he's a smart guy. And I was saying, I think comedians, because of the way they have to dissect and analyze language and words, I think it does make them have a more critical mind and a critical way of thinking. So I do enjoy that part of Joe Rogan in addition to his comedy.
That's true. That's true. Comedians are, and it's kind of in some ways, it's kind of an intellectual medium because you do have to think about situations and why people do things, and then you put a funny, sarcastic twist on it. So you do have to be a bit of a thinker, I suppose. That's a good analogy.
Well, like Jerry Seinfeld, you know, taking average, everyday situations and making them funny.
Right.
And I think you have to be able to see things on a deeper level.
That's true.
To be able to do that.
Like George Carlin, who's passed away, but he was one of those that I really liked because he would always look at situations and he would take things like political situations or environmental or anything to do with money and disparity of money, and he'd always make them funny, but it would make you think. And and he was a wordsmith.
Like
exactly.
Critical thinking is what it is. Just being able to see what isn't present, but it's there.
And comedy is always the best way. I feel that you can get things across sometimes, and people don't get quite as. I mean, you can offend people for sure, but oftentimes you can get messages through with humor, and then people think about it afterwards. As opposed to if you didn't say it with humor, they would get really offended.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I think, well, you know, like our those late night talk shows have they've become very political and funny, but they are also, you know, they're doing more than one thing. They're not just being funny; they're actually trying to get messages through to people.
Sure.
Like Trevor Noah,
right?
They say Jon Stewart kind of started it. There were some other ones that do those political commentaries. Bill Maher.
Bill Maher, yeah, which I always watch every Friday. Okay. His has turned into sort of a variety show, but it's definitely political. I'm trying to think other comedy. Well, Jim Jeffries had one for a while that was, you know, not just political, but he definitely did emphasize politics. His show's not on the air anymore, but yeah, there's a bunch of them. Trevor Noah is the one that I usually watch. Oh, and Samantha Bee. I watch Samantha Bee. She's really good too, and she's definitely political.
Yeah, political with a funny twist.
Right,
so,
right.
Anyway, well,
Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to say we were going to miss Joe Rogan because I'm kind of late to the party, but
we will miss you, Joe Rogan, on YouTube. But you're still around because you're going to be on Spotify.
Right.
But I'll miss the YouTube videos because I'm a YouTube fan. I don't even watch TV anymore. I just watch YouTube. That's all I do. So I will miss Joe Rogan on YouTube, but we wish him the best.
Yeah, he's still around. And, you know, I'm actually I'm happy for him with his success because, you know, he's jumping into the big time now, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And he deserves it. You know, if anybody has a chance, we looked up his very first video, his very first podcast.
That's right.
And, you know, he didn't know it was going to turn into what it has. So that's a bit of an inspiration to anyone. You know, anyone can make it, I guess. And he's probably a little more successful than somebody who's not known because he was known from the UFC. He was the commentator. He did Fear Factor. He was the host.
Right.
And then, of course, his comedy. So a lot of people knew him, but if he didn't have good things to say, he wouldn't have been successful as a podcaster. True. So,
and he is intelligent. You know, I've seen his interviews, and I always think that he comes up with really good questions. You know, I like his variety of guests. He always invites people that I find very interesting, like Steven Tyler, Elon Musk,
Yeah.
Oliver Stone, and but like I said, the genius of his show is that he keeps people entertained for such a long amount of time.
I know. Well, and the thing that he said about it is why he liked being on a podcast. There's no format. There's no
Right.
like submitting questions ahead of time. And sometimes they go off on just personal conversations, and it always seems to be very interesting. So yeah, on a 3-hour podcast to keep people's attention that's a lot of talent.
Yeah, that's a feat
Yeah.
unto itself.
Yeah. Yes. So,
All right.
yeah.
Well, we'll miss you, Joe, and hopefully we'll see you
Yes,
soon
we will.
on
Yeah.
Spotify. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
All right.
Talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.